Next question. Go to Dr. Woolley.
Thanks. Hey, I think I heard you say that the courts should not make policy and that they have arrogated the right to themselves, the right to make policy. And so my question is, to what extent is it not merely that they've arrogated the right to make policy to themselves, but that the legislature has colluded in that they want the courts to make policy, that they want to punt difficult decisions to the legislature, whether it's school funding or income tax or something else, that they want to give things off to the court so that they are insulated from public opinion. In other words, they want to hide behind the courts.
Guilty as charged. The legislature absolutely has punted. And let me tell you something, it's interesting. Under federal constitutional, I don't know, I'm too close to this, I guess. Under federal constitution law, one of the things you're required to have is a real case and controversy. In other words, when Emily and I go before the court, in the federal courts, I'm sorry to pick you on you, Emily, but it's fun. She has to have a real case, and I have to have a real case. We can't go in there and say, hey, court, we would like this result. Will you please make sure that we get this result? You're not allowed to use the court as an alternative legislature, and yet that's exactly what's happening. We had many cases where people go to the court because they can't get a legislative result. Perfect example was the gay marriage controversy in New Jersey. There was not enough political support to get the result that they wanted in the legislature, so they ran to the court. By the way, I don't criticize them. It was a brilliant political strategy. They managed to get the result that they wanted initially. But is it good constitutional law? Absolutely not. The legislature is made up of people, and one of the downsides of being an elected official is what's the most important thing for a lot of elected officials? Get reelected by whatever means necessary. And so if they can punt a difficult decision, they often will. That's where the governor comes in. It is up to the governor to provide leadership. He has an advantage. As a longtime legislator, I can tell you this. Think of trying to herd 120 cats, divided into two houses and further divided into two parties. It ain't easy getting things done. It's one of the reasons I believe that the legislature should be cut in half to make it more manageable and make it more responsive to the problems. The problem of the court, the problem of the legislature has been that you've had a lot of people in the legislature who are more interested in getting a result that benefits their home district than they are in protecting the rights and privileges under the Constitution for the legislature. There has not been a sense of institutional pride and integrity in the legislature. And I guess that speaks to the fact that so much of what we do in Trenton happens in the dark. The northern half of New Jersey pays attention to New York. The southern half of New Jersey gets its media from Philadelphia. And the little cockroaches in Trenton only show up when there's light. You know, it's a problem. People in New Jersey have to pay more attention. I mean, let me tell you, at 9 million people, we're larger than some countries in Europe. We deserve our own attention, and we certainly ought to be paying more attention to our government. But we need a government. By the way, part of the problem, I mean, again, I call myself a Republican. I'm more of a constitutionalist than anything. Our Constitution is almost 60 years old. In fact, it is 60 years old since it was revised. In that time, the state government has increased from 15,000 people to 80,000 people. The bureaucracy has completely developed as a fourth branch of government during that time. I think it's time to revisit our Constitution. I think it's time to rebalance the powers in our Constitution so that they work more effectively. It was fine to have an all-powerful government when our state government was, frankly, smaller than some city governments. Now I think it's different. It's a very large organization, and I'm not sure that the family-style approach to it works very well, where the governor makes all the decisions for the family. I think we have to have a system that has better checks and balances. I have advocated for years that we have an elected state auditor or state controller, independently elected, so that you get honest figures. I'm tired of being force-fed phony figures cooked up by the state treasurer because the governor wants it that way. I believe that we ought to have an independent attorney general. Why is that? Well, independently elected. Simple. Because while Chris Christie was putting 130 crooks, public crooks, in jail during his term as U.S. attorney, I was scratching my head saying, where the hell is the New Jersey Attorney General? There was virtually nothing being done by the Attorney General. And compare the size of the staff. Chris Christie oversees a staff, or did oversee a staff of about 200. The Attorney General has something like 9,000 people at his or her disposal. Why wasn't the Attorney General doing more of a job? I think it's because the Attorney General fundamentally still serves the governor of New Jersey. So yeah, I think there need to be major changes in that particular issue. And I realize I went beyond the question, but that's...
We'd like to take another student question.
Okay, doctor.
Do you see anything positive in Abbot or COAH? And should one region focus more on affordable housing than another?
Say the second part again.
Should one region focus on affordable housing more than another?
Do I see anything positive in Abbot? Yeah, I see Abbot as a failed social experiment. And the fundamental problem with Abbot was it was what they call OPM, other people's money. I guarantee you, you will never spend your own money as carelessly as you might spend somebody else's. You will care a great deal more. And for years and years, we've been shoveling billions and billions of dollars, and it just hasn't worked. As Einstein said, at some point, you got to try something different if you want a different outcome. And I think it's obvious we should be trying something different than just continuing the Abbott formula. Oh my gosh, I personally propose equal funding for every single student in the state of New Jersey. I will also tell you that as you're considering issues like this, you know, I love to give this example. I have people who run around and say, my God, but the Supreme Court making policy. Wait a minute, Brown versus Board of Education. It was the Supreme Court that ended segregation, racial segregation in the United States. And that's true. But what was the case that they overturned to do that? Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. When was Plessy versus Ferguson? It was the 1890s. In other words, when the Supreme Court screws it up and makes a mistake, it can take half a century to fix it. It's no different here in New Jersey. And actually, to take the extreme example, take the Dred Scott case, where we decided, a Supreme Court decided it was okay to own somebody. That only cost the Civil War and 600,000 dead. Courts should not be allowed to make policy.